Oskar Schindler, Hitler Outwitted. Oskar Schindler was born on April 28, 1908 in Svitau, Moravia. At this time, it was an Austro-Hungarian province. He was raised Catholic and remained at home throughout World War I. While his home country was being incorporated into the Czech Republic, he was attending a series of trade schools until he married Emil Pelzel in 1928. Through the next few years, Oskar held several jobs, including the office of a corporal in the Czech army. He then began to work with Amt Auslands, the German Foreign Intelligence Agency. Later, in February 1939, he joined the Nazi Party. However, he did not share any beliefs concerning supremacy with them. He was a businessman and saw the rising Nazi influence as a way to make money, but he never thought that he was soon to become a wartime hero. The Nazis had a plan to Aryanize, or more accurately, Germanize, their newly occupied Poland. They recognized Schindler's business expertise and moved him to Krakow, Poland. There he bought a Jewish-owned factory and converted it to an enamelware factory. Now all he needed was workers. There was a nearby ghetto with many unemployed Jews. Oskar could get them to work in his factory, and he wouldn't even have to pay them. By 1944, he had employed around 1,700 workers at his plant, and about 1,100 of them were Jews from the ghetto. Because his workers would have still been susceptible to moving to death or extermination camps, he had to repeatedly bribe other Nazis to keep them there. This action, which he did purely to make money, made him a hero to many Jews. At one point, he had to convince the Nazi Party to annex his factory into the Plaszow concentration camp. This meant that he would have to bribe Nazi officials a lot more than he usually did. But he was successful and spent a lot more money on many more occasions to save his workers. Over his time in Emalia, he saved thousands of Jews from the brutality of the Nazis, and quite possibly death. After the war, Oskar was awarded because of his valiant efforts to save Jews at a great personal risk. Today, Oskar is immortalized in the film Schindler's List, a movie depicting the saving of the Jews in Emalia. We attempted to connect Oskar Schindler to the conformity studies, and we found very interesting results. Oskar didn't really fit into any of the categories. For example, Milgram's shock experiment tried to prove that when responsibility was removed from someone, they could act as horribly as the Nazis. Oskar had worked for the Nazis, and because of their beliefs about supremacy, he had no responsibility for his actions. However, he decided to save the Jews, rather than harm them. Then the line test tried to show how most people would identify with a larger group, even if what they were doing was against the subject's personal beliefs. Schindler was surrounded by people mistreating the Jews, but he didn't identify with any of them. He was simply a businessman trying to make money. Sure, he didn't pay them, but that was just because he wanted to earn more for himself. Next, the blue eyes, brown eyes test showed that when it was demonstrated that some people were better than others, it took very little time for the better people to abuse the others. Once again, Oskar was surrounded by people demonstrating that the Jews were below them. However, he treated them like people. In the Stanford prison experiment, the mistreated prisoners had no refuge from their captors' brutality. Oskar Schindler provided some of the prisoners of the concentration camp with a way to get away from that. There is also no accounts of Schindler abusing his workers, both verbally and physically. We also tried to connect him to the Holocaust-related books we read. The easiest to connect to was I've Lived 1,000 Years. Ellie had to deal with so many terrible things, and Oskar saw others dealing with the exact same things and saved some of them from those things. In Mouse, the main character had to experience some of these terrible things firsthand. It changed him into an emotionally distressed person for the rest of his life. Oskar was able to provide some Jewish people with a way to get away from that, and many of those have described their joy at knowing that someone could be so great with such terrible things happening around them. Finally, we connected Schindler to a separate piece. We thought that Finney's character, if he had experienced a ghetto, would never be able to live. Schindler could have assisted him, or someone like him, by giving him a place to work in safety, rather than endure the terrors of the ghetto. We found that Gene had many similar characteristics as Oskar, specifically a strong competitive urge and an acceptance of how the world actually is. Oskar Schindler was a hero to many. His business expertise led him to save thousands, but more than that, it was his bravery. Do you think you could be so brave?